My name is Elizabeth Hart, and the night my car spun off that icy Denver road should have been the moment my family rallied around me. Instead, lying stitched and broken in a hospital bed, I discovered the people I trusted most saw my daughters as burdens, and me as disposable. They left me alone when I needed them most, but they're about to learn what happens when the woman they underestimated refuses to stay broken. Before we dive in, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. And if you've ever been let down by family when it mattered most, hit like and let's talk about it. St. Luke's Hospital smelled like antiseptic and something colder, something sterile and final. I blinked up at the flickering light on the ceiling, the room spinning ever so slightly. My ribs ached. My shoulder was stitched and bandaged. And my girls, oh God, the girls. My phone was already in my hand before I even registered moving. My fingers trembled as I dialed. Mia picked up on the second ring, her voice breezy as if nothing had happened. "Lizzie, what's up?" I could barely speak. "I need you to take them, please, the girls, they're home alone." There was silence on the other end, then the unmistakable sound of her sighing. "Are you kidding? I've got a yoga class in an hour and Nate's mom is in town. Mia, I'm in the hospital." I choked out, my voice breaking. "There was an accident. I need someone to stay with them. Just for the night, please. You want me to drop everything and play babysitter now? Seriously, you've always been so dramatic." "Mia, this isn't about me," I whispered. "This is about your nieces, about Emma and Lucy." That's when her tone turned ice cold. "They're not my responsibility, Elizabeth. You chose to have kids, you deal with it." The call didn't end with a click. It ended with shouting. A back and forth that spun wildly from pleading to accusation to betrayal, until the pain in my chest wasn't just from the accident, it was from something deeper, something old and festering. I barely noticed when the nurse stepped in to check my vitals. I was sobbing so hard, the machine started beeping. The young nurse, Elena, I think her name was, adjusted my oxygen, whispering something about staying calm, about rest. But how could I rest? My daughters, ages 6 and 8, were sitting in our apartment alone. I taught Emma how to lock the doors, and Lucy knew how to use the emergency contacts on the fridge. But they were just kids. My kids. And I was stuck in this white box of a room, with tubes in my arms and a knot in my throat the size of a boulder. When I tried calling Mia again, it went straight to voicemail. I left her a message that started calm and ended in something closer to begging. Then I tried her husband, Nate. Then my parents. No answer, no answer, no answer. I was alone, the kind of alone you don't come back from, and in that silence something shifted inside me. Not anger yet, that would come later, but the first seed of something else. A whisper in the dark, "They're never coming, Liz, you're on your own now." The next call I made, hands still trembling, was to my mother. I told myself maybe Mia was just overwhelmed. Maybe my parents would understand. The phone rang twice before Mom picked up, her voice oddly chipper. I could hear wind in the background, distant chatter, and what sounded unmistakably like laughter. "Elizabeth, finally, what's going on? Everything okay?" For a moment, I thought I was hallucinating. I'm in the hospital, Mom. I was in a car accident." My voice cracked. "I need someone to look after Emma and Lucy. Mia won't help." There was a pause, then a hum that didn't match the situation at all. "Well, that's unfortunate, but we're already en route to Cancun, honey." "What?" "The flight's boarding now. We're with Mia and Nate, you know, the trip we booked months ago." I sat up straighter in the hospital bed, the IV tugging at my arm. "You're going to Mexico right now with Mia." "Well, we deserve some fun too, sweetheart. It's been a stressful year." I didn't respond immediately. The white walls seemed to close in, the oxygen in the room thick with disbelief. "And you're just leaving. Knowing I'm in the hospital, knowing your granddaughters are home alone." My mother sighed as if I'd asked her to cancel a manicure, not reconsider child abandonment. "Elizabeth, you always get like this when things go wrong. You expect everyone to rearrange their lives for your problems." I blinked hard. "They're not problems, they're your granddaughters." "Don't be so melodramatic," she clipped. "Anyway, before I forget, can you please top up the shared account? The hotel froze our card and your dad left his wallet at home." Silence stretched between us, thick and surreal. "You want me to send you money?" "Well, your name S on the account too, just a quick transfer. We're already at the gate. Love you." The line went dead before I could say another word. The dial tone hummed in my ear, dull and constant, syncing with the monitor beside my bed. I looked down at the phone in my lap. No missed calls, no texts. My body hurt, yes. But nothing compared to that moment. It wasn't just abandonment. It was clarity. I saw it all at once. I'd been the emergency contact, the babysitter, the family doormat. I'd dropped everything for them more times than I could count. When Dad needed rides to doctor appointments, I was there. When Mia's nanny canceled, I picked up the slack. When Mom needed help figuring out how to submit a passport application online, guess who she called? Me. Always me. And now, flat on my back, stitched up like a rag doll with my babies home alone, I was inconvenient, disposable, an afterthought. Somewhere between the heartbeat monitor and the sound of a gurney being rolled past my room, I stopped crying. I opened the banking app, stared at the balance in our shared family account, and felt a slow, electric chill run through me. I didn't transfer a cent. I wouldn't. I closed the app and placed my phone gently on the tray beside me. Then I stared up at the ceiling tiles, letting the sterile quiet wrap around me. It wasn't just pain now. It was purpose. I didn't know how yet. I didn't know when. But one thing was certain. This was the last time anyone in my family would treat me like I didn't matter. The hospital lights had dimmed into that soft nighttime hue that tries too hard to feel comforting. Nurses passed my doorway in quiet intervals, and the smell of antiseptic clung to everything. My daughters were still alone. That thought throbbed louder than my stitched-up shoulder. I had no more names to call, no one else to beg. So I lay there, upright in bed, a ghost of myself when the knock came soft, polite, almost uncertain. I turned my head and blinked. Standing in the doorway, holding a basket wrapped in crinkled cellophane and ribbon, was Jackson. Jackson Monroe, my boss. The young, sharply dressed manager who always arrived 5 minutes early to team meetings and remembered everyone's birthdays but never made a big deal about his own. "Hi," he said gently. "I heard what happened. You missed your shift, and when no one heard from you, I got worried." I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Just this weak little exhale that could have meant anything. He stepped inside, the door swinging shut behind him. "I hope it's okay that I came," he added quickly. "You left your emergency contact form blank. I had to call around to find out where you were." I gave a small nod, trying not to let the tears gather again. Not now, not in front of him. He looked around, hesitating, then pulled a chair closer to my bed. "I brought you some stuff," he said, setting the basket on the table beside the untouched hospital lunch tray. "Fruit, crackers, a decent chocolate bar, figured that's what hospitals always forget." I almost laughed at that, but it came out as a ragged little breath. Jackson watched me for a moment, then leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Can I ask something?" I nodded again. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I mean, not just the accident. I saw your file, broken collarbone, concussion, but you don't look like someone with just a physical injury." That cracked something in me, just a hairline fracture, but enough for the truth to slip through. "My daughters," I whispered, my throat tight. "They're home alone." He blinked. "Wait, now," I nodded. "I called my sister. She said she's not a babysitter. My parents are in Cancun." I tried to smile, but it collapsed halfway up my face. "They needed me to top up the hotel fund." Jackson stared at me for a long moment, and something in his jaw tightened. "How old are your girls?" 6 and 8. His eyes softened in a way that made me want to both thank him and crumble into the bed. "What's their names?" "Emma and Lucy." He stood up suddenly. "Give me your address." "What?" "Your address," he repeated calmly, pulling out his phone. "If they're alone, they shouldn't be. I'll go get them." I blinked hard, convinced I hadn't heard him right. "Jackson, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to," he said. "I'm choosing to. Someone needs to." I opened my mouth again, this time to protest, but he was already typing. I recited the address numbly, watching him jot it down. "I'll bring them here," he said, slipping his phone back into his pocket. "They'll be safer with you than alone, even if it's just for tonight." He started to walk away, then turned at the door. "And Elizabeth, you're not alone, not tonight." He left before I could find the words to thank him. And for the first time since I woke up in that hospital bed, I didn't feel completely hollow. Not filled, exactly, but no longer just broken pieces. Just waiting for my daughters. Waiting to hold them. waiting for something, someone to prove I still mattered. I didn't let myself hope. Hope had always felt like a luxury I couldn't afford, not with 2 daughters, overdue bills, and a family who'd perfected the art of conditional love. So I waited in that cold hospital bed, watching the minute hand on the wall clock crawl like it knew I was counting on it. I imagined all the worst-case scenarios. That Jackson wouldn't find the right door code. That Emma would be afraid and not open the door. That Lucy would cry herself sick and Jackson, a man they'd only met once at a company picnic, wouldn't know what to do. That he would change his mind. But an hour later, exactly 61 minutes to be exact, I heard the knock. 2 short taps, then a quiet pause. My heart lodged itself in my throat. I tried to sit up straighter, wincing at the tug in my shoulder just as the door creaked open. And there they were. 2 pairs of small, sleepy eyes. Cartoon pajama sets wrinkled from being curled on the couch. Emma holding her sister's hand with quiet, practiced authority. Lucy clutching Mr. Barry, the one-eyed stuffed animal she hadn't let go of since she was 3. Behind them stood Jackson. And for a moment, I could have sworn he looked more relieved than I did. "They were watching a movie," he said softly, like we were already in some unspoken rhythm. "TV dinner still half warm. I had to knock for a while." Emma climbed onto the bed before I could finish reaching for her. Lucy followed a second later, pressing her small body into my side, careful of the wires and the brace on my arm. I cried. Not the messy, gasping kind. Just silent tears that soaked my collar and smelled faintly of Jackson's cologne, still lingering in the air from when he stepped inside. "You came back," Emma whispered, her tiny hand brushing mine. "Always," I managed to say, my voice catching in the middle. "Always, baby." Jackson stood quietly near the doorway. He didn't rush, he didn't interrupt, he just let us have that moment. "You're a miracle," I whispered, looking up at him through bleary eyes. He shook his head. "They're your heart, of course I'd bring them." There was no flourish to it, no grand gesture, just that sentence, solid as a promise. I wanted to say more, to ask why, to explain how much it meant. But Lucy yawned so wide her eyes teared up, and Jackson finally stepped closer. "I stopped by the nurse's station," he said. "They're getting you into a private room, one with space for the girls to stay overnight." My brow furrowed. "That costs." "Don't worry about it," he said too smoothly. "They owe me a few favors." I didn't believe that for a second, but I also didn't have the energy to argue. He helped tuck the girls in, Lucy curled up at the foot of the bed, Emma beside me, her head resting gently on my uninjured shoulder. I watched Jackson as he folded their jackets and set their tiny shoes neatly under the window bench. He worked with a kind of quiet precision, as if this was something he did often, something he wanted to do. "You didn't have to," I said again, because it felt too big to leave unsaid. He paused, then looked at me with a softness that surprised me. "Elizabeth, I've seen you juggle more than anyone should. I've watched you take on triple shifts without complaining, bring your girls to staff barbecues, smile through exhaustion. I always figured someone had your back." He shook his head slowly. "I didn't realize no one did." That shattered me more than the accident, because it was true. No one did. But tonight, someone showed up anyway. Morning filtered in through linen blinds, soft and honey-colored. For a few seconds, I forgot I was in a hospital. The sheets didn't smell like bleach anymore. The hum of monitors still buzzed low, but it was background noise now, not a threat. I opened my eyes to find Lucy curled up beside me, her breath even and warm against my side. Emma sat cross-legged on the window bench with a coloring book spread across her lap, tongue sticking out in concentration as she shaded in a cartoon cat. For a moment, I just watched them. My girls, safe, near, and mine. Then I noticed the room. This wasn't the stark, impersonal cube they wheeled me into yesterday. It was bigger, warmer. There were folded blankets on the love seat, a mini fridge stocked with juice, and a tall woman I didn't recognize standing by a portable tray table, arranging bowls of oatmeal with a kind of practiced calm you usually only see in people who have raised many, many children. "Good morning," she said when she caught my gaze. Her voice had the kind of warmth that makes you feel instantly known, even if you are. "I'm lured. Mr. Monroe arranged for me to stay with the girls today so you can rest." Mr. Monroe. Jackson. I sat up too fast and winced as pain radiated across my shoulder. Lourdes was beside me in an instant, adjusting the bed controls with a practiced hand. "You're okay," she said. "Just let it move you. No sudden heroics." The girls looked up at the sound, and in seconds they were clambering onto the bed, hugging me gently like they'd learned how to avoid the bandages and bruises overnight. "Mommy," Lucy whispered. "We slept here. The nurse gave Emma a juice with a bendy straw." Emma nodded solemnly. "And I kept Mr. Barry on guard, no bad dreams." I kissed the tops of their heads, willing myself not to cry again. "You two are the bravest girls in the world." "And Lourdes made oatmeal," Emma added. "With cinnamon, and she brought coloring books that smell like strawberries." Lourdes smiled, clearly used to winning hearts fast. "I've worked with kids for over 20 years, she said gently. "I'll be here while you recover. I'll keep things calm, and I'll always knock." I nodded, too overwhelmed to say much. She returned to the table just as the door opened quietly. Jackson stepped inside. He wore the same navy blazer from yesterday, but his tie was gone and the top 2 buttons of his shirt were undone, like he hadn't really slept. He carried a tray with 4 coffee cups and a white paper bag. "I didn't know what kind of coffee you liked," he said, lifting the tray. "So I got 4 different kinds." I stared at him, half smiling despite myself. "Hazelnut latte." He handed it over without blinking. "I guessed." "You guessed right." He handed chocolate milk to the girls, still in their pajamas and already mid-cartoon, and took a seat on the edge of the bed's visitor chair, resting the paper bag beside him. "I brought real food, too. Well, realer than hospital food." I glanced over at Lourdes, who gave me a small nod like she approved of him, of all this. When the girls returned to their coloring books, Jackson leaned in just enough for his voice to drop to a whisper. "I hope I didn't overstep, with the room, the nanny, everything." "You didn't," I said quickly, my fingers tightening slightly around the coffee cup. I'm not used to this." He looked at me for a moment. "To what?" "To someone seeing a mess and not backing away." His expression changed. Not pity, not shock, something quieter. A sadness, maybe, but more than that, recognition. "You're not a mess," he said softly. "You're a mother who was left holding everything while everyone else looked the other way." I stared down into the foam swirls of my drink. "I just didn't think it would be my family looking away." He didn't respond right away. But his silence wasn't awkward. It was heavy, present. The kind of silence that lets your pain breathe without smothering it. Finally, I looked up. "Why are you doing all this?" Jackson exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Because someone has to care, and honestly, maybe I've wanted to for a while." It wasn't romantic. It wasn't charity. It was human. And somehow that made it feel bigger. I didn't know what would happen next, but in this borrowed piece, with cinnamon oatmeal and coloring books and 2 sleeping girls beside me, I started to believe something I hadn't in years. Maybe I wasn't meant to survive alone. That afternoon, the girls giggled across the room, lost in some made-up game that involved stickers, hospital socks, and a very elaborate ranking system for stuffed animals. I sat beside Jackson on the bench near the hospital's outdoor courtyard, a small, fenced-in patch of grass with faded tricycles and benches meant to be cheerful. It wasn't much, but it was sunlit, and the laughter of my daughters filled the air like something sacred. "They don't seem traumatized," I murmured, still surprised. "They're with you," Jackson said. "That's all they needed." I looked down at my hands, the white gauze on my wrist, the bruises turning yellow. The wind was mild, brushing the hairs on my arms like a gentle warning. "I don't talk about my family," I said after a long pause, almost testing the words. Jackson didn't react, just waited. "They've always seen me as the problem, or at best the inconvenience." I looked out toward the grass, where Emma was twirling with Lucy, both of them in paper crowns Lourdes had somehow crafted from napkins and tape. "My mother always said I ruined her body, that she never bounced back after me. And when I had Emma at 22, after my husband left during the 2nd trimester, she called me an echo of her worst decisions." Jackson turned his head, his jaw tightening. "They'd come around when it looked good, smiles for holiday photos, birthday cards with passive-aggressive notes, but whenever I really needed them," I trailed off, biting the inside of my cheek. "The year Lucy had pneumonia," I continued quietly, "I called my dad for help because I couldn't afford both antibiotics and rent. He told me I should have married better." Jackson's eyes darkened, but he didn't interrupt. They act like Emma and Lucy are weights tied around my ankles, like I should have given them up. Mia said once, during Thanksgiving dinner, no less, that some women aren't cut out for sacrifice. Then looked right at me while slicing cranberry sauce like she hadn't just gutted me. I laughed bitterly, the sound hollow and strange in the open air. They always made me feel like I'd failed by becoming a mother, that every hard thing I faced was proof I'd made bad choices, that asking for help was a weakness I should be ashamed of. Jackson's silence wasn't empty, it was active. Like he was holding space for me to break if I needed to. I turned toward him. They always treated me like I was the family disappointment and that my daughters were accidents. He shook his head slowly. His fists were clenched in his lap now, his knuckles white. "You don't deserve this," he said firmly, not softly, not kindly, just firmly, like it was truth. "I'm not saying that because I pity you," he added, turning toward me now. "I'm saying it because it's true. No one, no woman should be punished for being the only adult in a sea of cowards." That struck something in me so hard, I almost had to look away. "You know," I said, my voice lower, more uncertain, "I always thought strength meant pretending it didn't hurt, that if I just kept holding it together long enough, maybe they'd finally see me as someone worth loving." Jackson leaned in slightly. "They don't deserve that version of you." I blinked. "You don't owe them more silence," he continued. "Or more patience. You've given them everything and they spat on it." I looked at him, really looked, and saw no judgment, no pity, just fire, like he had enough anger for both of us when mine had finally gone numb. "I'm not used to being believed," I admitted. He smiled gently. "Get used to it." The girls called out just then, Lucy announcing Emma had been crowned queen of the playground. Jackson rose, offered his hand without speaking. And for the first time in a long, long time, I let someone steady me. Not because I was weak, but because maybe I was finally done carrying it all alone. That night, the girls were fast asleep. Lucy curled into my side with one foot kicked free of the blanket, and Emma sprawled across the pull-out cot like a queen claiming new territory. Lourdes had gone home with promises to return at sunrise. The room was quiet except for the occasional beep of my IV machine and the gentle hum of the AC. It was the first real stillness I'd had in days. I should have slept. But instead, I reached for my phone. I hadn't looked at it much since the accident, avoiding calls, ignoring texts. But something inside me itched like a splinter buried beneath skin. And when I opened the social media app, it slid straight into my chest like a blade. There they were. Mia, my parents, Nate, wearing swimsuits that probably cost more than my monthly rent, lounging in poolside cabanas, champagne flutes in hand. The caption on Mia's latest photo read, "Best family vacay ever, woman, tropical palm, blessed family first." The phrase made my stomach turn. In one photo, my mother stood between Mia and Nate, all three holding matching piña coladas. Another showed my father grinning beside a carved fruit platter in the shape of a flamingo. They looked euphoric, like the world had rearranged itself to suit them perfectly, and I had never existed at all. No one would have guessed that just days earlier I'd called Mia from a hospital bed, begging for help for my daughters, or that I'd heard my mother ask for money from that same bed without even asking if I was okay. I stared at the screen, fingers tightening around the phone. My vision blurred, but I didn't cry. Not this time. I just felt done, like the final piece had clicked into place. I opened the banking app. Our shared family account sat at the top of the screen, a relic from years ago when we'd all chipped in for Dad's 60th birthday trip. Since then, it had become a convenience for everyone else and a leash for me. I'd been the one refilling it, quietly, automatically, like it was my duty, like I owed them something. I hovered for a moment, thumb trembling over the screen, and then slowly, deliberately, I hit freeze account. It asked me to confirm. I did. Then I opened a new text message thread. My fingers moved quickly, fueled not by rage, but clarity. "Elizabeth, me, hope the cocktails were worth it. The hotel will be calling soon, cards declined. Good luck explaining it." I hit send. My heart was pounding, not with fear, but with something electric, something righteous. I stared at the screen, half expecting an immediate response, but there was nothing, no three dots. No Mir is typing, just silence. And for once I welcomed it. I placed the phone face down on the nightstand and leaned back against the pillows, exhaling slowly. It wasn't revenge. It was self-respect. I hadn't screamed. I hadn't begged. I'd simply reminded them, I am not your ATM. I am not your afterthought. I am not the silent sister who funds your joy while you mock my pain. And I would never be again. It was 4 days after I'd been discharged from the hospital. 4 days of lukewarm casseroles from neighbors I barely knew, of sponge baths and whispered bedtime stories from my hospital bed at home, of Jackson appearing like clockwork with groceries, and an easy, quiet presence that soothed the sharp edges of everything. I was sitting on the living room floor, braiding Lucy's hair. The scent of her strawberry shampoo clung to my hoodie, and the rhythm of weaving her soft curls grounded me in a way I hadn't realized I needed. Emma was curled up on the couch with a book about a girl who tamed wild horses, and the entire room smelled like cinnamon from lured breakfast muffins. It was peaceful, which is how I should have known it wouldn't last. The doorbell rang. Not a friendly ding-dong, but a press-and-hold, urgent kind of ring that made Lucy stiffen in my lap. Before I could move, Emma peeked through the curtain and turned to me, her voice small. "Grandma's outside. With Grandpa." My stomach clenched. I stood slowly, biting back the flare of pain in my shoulder, and motioned for the girls to go upstairs. Lourdes, who had just returned from the market, silently herded them up with a glance that said she understood exactly what was about to happen. I opened the door. My mother stormed in before I even had a chance to speak, her perfume thick and sour. "You froze the account," she hissed, her heels clicking against my hardwood floor like accusations. My father followed, less theatrical but with his jaw clenched tight. His silence was its own kind of violence. "You left us stranded," she snapped, tossing her oversized sunglasses onto the kitchen counter. "At a 5-star resort, the hotel manager humiliated us publicly because our card was declined. Do you have any idea how that looked?" "Yes," I said calmly, leaning against the doorway. "It looked exactly how it should have." She blinked. "I begged you to help," I continued, voice even. "From a hospital bed. I told you my children were alone and you told me to top up the card. That was your response." She waved a hand dismissively. "You're being overly dramatic. You were fine." And Mia said, "No," I said, my voice rising just slightly. "Stop. I don't care what Mia said. This is about you, about how you left me, about how none of you even showed up." My mother's face flushed. "We've supported you for years. You mean emotionally?" I asked. "Because financially, I've been the one quietly funding you." I turned to my father. "How many times did you let Mom use my name to open those joint accounts? How often did you borrow from me with promises you never kept?" His mouth tightened. He didn't answer. "I kept your little secrets," I said. "I paid for your overdue utilities. I sent you gas money when Dad's truck broke down in Vegas. I took Mia's kids when her babysitter bilayed, and I didn't say a word when she missed Emma's birthday 2 years in a row." "Elizabeth," my mother started. "No," I cut in, "not this time." I stepped forward, my voice low and hard. "I'm done being the family scapegoat. I'm done being your financial backup plan, your emotional sponge, your silent punching bag." My mother blinked as if trying to remember who she was supposed to be in this scene. The manipulator, the victim. "This house is mine," I said, "and you don't speak to me like this in it, not anymore." "You'll regret this," my father said suddenly, his voice like cold stone. "You're making a mistake you can't undo." I stared at him, letting the threat settle between us like smoke. "I already regretted letting it go on this long," I replied. He moved to speak again, but I held up a hand. "Get out." He hesitated. "I said get out." They left, not quietly, not with dignity. My mother cursed under her breath, my father slammed the door. But they left. And I stood there, heart pounding, breath sharp, knowing that this time they were the ones who flinched. The next morning the house was still standing. No smoke, no shattered windows, no angry follow-up texts. Just the hum of the dishwasher and the soft sound of Lucy singing in the bathroom, off-key and fearless. But the storm hadn't passed. It had simply changed form. I sat at the kitchen table in my threadbare hoodie, both hands wrapped around a warm mug. My bruises were healing, but inside, I still felt like glass barely fused back together. Jackson slid a plate of toast in front of me, then took the seat across the table like he belonged there. And in a way, he did. He'd shown up that morning with his usual knock, 3 short taps and a pause, and a grocery bag full of things I hadn't asked for: bananas, almond milk, Lucy's favorite cereal, the coffee I liked with the gold lid. "You didn't have to," ID said. "I know," he'd replied. "That's never the point." Now we sat in companionable quiet, no pressure to talk, no probing questions, just presence. After a few minutes, I finally said it. "They'll come for me again." Jackson didn't flinch. He looked up slowly, gaze steady. "I know. My parents, they don't take humiliation lightly. And Mia, she thrives on revenge dressed up as righteousness." He nodded, taking a sip of coffee. "Then we'll be ready." That word stuck in my chest like a gift I didn't know how to hold. "I keep waiting for you to decide this is too much," I admitted. "That I'm too much, the mess, the history, the girls, all of it." Jackson leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. "Elizabeth, I'm not here out of obligation." I said nothing. He went on. "I see you. I've always seen you. Not just as a mom or an employee or someone patching things together with duct tape and grace. I see you. And I admire the hell out of you." My throat tightened. "Even now. Especially now." We sat in that silence, thicker now, warmer, until Emma wandered in, rubbing sleep from her eyes and asking if toast could count as dessert if you added enough jam. Jackson got up to help her, and I just watched him. How he moved without performance. How he understood boundaries without asking. How he let me lead without making me feel alone. Later, after the girls were dressed and Lourdes took them to the park, I found Jackson standing by the living room window, watching the trees sway outside. I joined him, unsure what to say. He spoke first. "You know they don't scare me, right?" I looked at him. "They've used guilt and shame and control against you for years. But they don't have anything left to threaten you with." I laughed quietly. "They sent me hospital bills for my dad's blood pressure medication last year because, and I quote, 'stress from your life choices made him sick.'" Jackson raised an eyebrow. "You're kidding." "I wish I were." He stepped closer. "That kind of manipulation doesn't work anymore. Not on the woman who stared them down and said, 'Get out.' Not on the woman who froze the account they were bleeding dry. They know it, Liz." "Then why do I still feel like I'm waiting for the next hit?" "Because you've never been allowed to feel safe." "Not really." He was right. I hadn't. But as I stood there, the autumn light washing over the hardwood floors, I realized something else. Maybe safety wasn't a place. Maybe it was a person who showed up with groceries and never made me beg for kindness. Maybe it was a quiet kitchen and a cup of coffee I didn't make myself. Maybe it was 2 little girls upstairs, humming to themselves like they'd finally exhaled. And maybe, just maybe, safety was learning that I didn't have to do this alone anymore. It happened on a Wednesday. The girls were upstairs doing homework. Lourdes had taken a quick trip to the pharmacy. Jackson had stopped by with soup and a smile, saying he had a late meeting downtown but wanted to see us first. The house smelled like rosemary and roasted vegetables. I was finally moving without flinching. There was music playing low from the speaker, something light and acoustic, the kind of song that makes you think maybe everything will turn out okay. Then came the knock. Not Jackson's gentle 3 taps, not lured rhythm either. This one was heavy, official, rhythmic, like someone trained to knock with authority. I opened the door and my heart dropped. 2 people stood on the porch, 1 man, 1 woman, plain clothes but with the unmistakable seriousness of government work. Lanyards, clipboards. The woman spoke first. "Elizabeth Hart." I nodded, immediately stepping forward, instinctively blocking the door as if my body could shield whatever they were here to take. "I'm Agent Kellerman," she said, flashing a badge. "This is my partner, Agent Ruiz. We're from Child Protective Services." I could barely hear her over the blood pounding in my ears. "We received an anonymous report regarding potential neglect and unsafe living conditions for your children." It was like being punched in the gut. "I'm sorry, what?" The male agent, Ruiz, spoke now, his tone calmer. "We're required to respond within 24 hours of receiving credible reports. We'd like to ask you a few questions and take a look around." Before I could form words, Jackson stepped forward from behind me, his voice low but resolute. "Hi, I'm Jackson Monroe, Elizabeth's partner." That word again, partner. He said it so naturally, without hesitation. He pulled out his phone and calmly showed them photos. Here S from last weekend, family dinner. Here's one from last Thursday, Emma's school project night. And here's my car outside, it's got 2 booster seats installed. Ruiz studied the photos. Kellerman glanced past us, trying to peer inside. I understand your concern, Jackson continued. But Elizabeth was recently injured in a car accident. She's had full-time care for her daughters, professionally hired. The house is clean, food stocked, and there's a nurse who checks in twice a week. I was still frozen, trying to regulate my breathing, but Jackson wasn't flustered. He stood like a wall. Can I ask, he said slowly, who filed the report? Anonymous, Kellerman replied flatly, as is protocol. Jackson nodded once. Of course, I just thought it might be helpful to know the context. Ms. Hart recently ended financial ties with certain family members. It's possible they're attempting retaliation. Both agents paused. Kellerman looked at me finally. Can we speak privately, Ms. Hart? Jackson looked to me, waiting for my call. I inhaled sharply, then nodded. Fine, come in. They walked through the living room, glancing around. The dishes were done. The girls' backpacks were neatly lined by the door. A drawing of our family, me, the girls, Lourdes, and Jackson was taped proudly to the fridge in Lucy's handwriting, our team. They asked me about my injury, my income, my childcare setup, my medical prescriptions. Did the girls have their own beds? Yes. Had they missed school? Were they ever left alone? Never. I answered everything because I had nothing to hide. And when they finally left after what felt like an eternity, they took nothing. No files, no warnings, no follow-up threats, just a quiet, thank you for your time, and the click of the door closing behind them. I stood in the hallway, hands still shaking, as Jackson wrapped an arm around my shoulders. That was the last move they had, he said quietly, his lips near my temple. They're out of plays now. I didn't answer right away. I just nodded, because deep down I knew this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about winning. The door closed behind them with a quiet click, and then the silence hit. Thick, heavy, absolute. I stood in the entryway, staring at the spot where the CPS agents had just stood. The air still carried their scent, some mixture of department-issued hand sanitizer and cold professionalism. Jackson stood beside me, one arm around my shoulders, but I barely felt it. My legs moved me forward like I was underwater. I didn't go far, just a few steps into the living room before my knees gave out. I sank onto the couch. The tears didn't come right away. First came the exhale, long, shaky, guttural. Then came the release. Not loud sobs, not this time, just quiet, relentless crying. The kind that leaks out slowly when your body realizes it no longer has to hold everything in. Jackson didn't speak. He didn't rush to comfort or fill the silence with reassurances. He just sat beside me, hands still firm on my shoulder, grounding me. After a long stretch of quiet, I finally whispered, "They sent CPS." Jackson nodded. "They did. They reported me for neglect, said my girls weren't safe. They lied." I wiped my face with my sleeve. "They wanted to scare me, to make me back down. And instead," Jackson said, "you stood your ground." I looked over at him. "You really think this is over?" He held my gaze. "I think they used the last weapon they had and it didn't work." I wanted to believe him, but doubt is stubborn. It clings to old wounds like scar tissue. "I've spent years trying to stay under their radar," I said softly. "Trying not to stir the pot, just survive quietly and keep my girls safe. And what did that get you?" I didn't answer because we both knew the answer. "They were never going to stop," Jackson said gently. "No matter how small you made yourself." That hit me harder than I expected, because it was true. I'd made myself small, palatable, easy to ignore. I'd played the good daughter, the silent sibling, the reliable backup plan. I'd smiled through pain and apologized for needing anything. And all it had done was teach them that I was disposable. "I froze their account," I whispered, like I was still trying to convince myself it happened. "I told them to get out of my house, and now this." I sat back against the cushions, the tension finally leaving my spine in waves. "They don't see me as a person," I said. "Just a resource, a problem when I stop being useful." Jackson's hand found mine. "But you saw them clearly this time, and you chose yourself." I turned to look at him. I didn't think I'd be able to, not really. Not when it came down to it. He smiled, but it wasn't pitying, it was proud, fierce. "You didn't just stand up to them," he said. You protected your girls, you protected your peace, you chose to break the cycle. I stared at the floor for a long time, the silence between us stretching comfortably now. I've always told my daughters that bravery isn't about not being scared, I said. It's about doing the right thing anyway. Jackson squeezed my hand. Looks like they learned that from the best. Just then, Lucy's footsteps pounded down the stairs, followed by Emma's laugh. Their voices filled the house like music. They weren't scared. They weren't shaken. They were home. I looked at Jackson and felt it like a pulse in my chest. They didn't win, not Mia, not my parents, not the voices in my head that had echoed their cruelty for years. They threw everything they had at me, and I was still standing, maybe even stronger. 2 months later, the world hadn't spun off its axis. The sky didn't fall. The girls still bickered over whose turn it was to feed the goldfish. The electric bills still showed up like clockwork, and I was still here, but everything felt different. I was no longer fighting for survival. I was choosing how to live. My daughters started school in early September. Fresh backpacks, new shoes, matching braids and butterfly clips and sparkly pencils. Emma ran straight into her 3rd grade classroom like she owned it. Lucy clung to my leg for exactly 37 seconds before spotting a girl with a unicorn lunchbox and deciding she was ready. I didn't cry, not until I got back to the car and sat alone in the driver's seat, hands shaking slightly around the steering wheel. Not because I was sad, but because for the first time in forever I wasn't terrified of what came next. That same week I returned to work. Part-time, my choice. Jackson had offered me flexibility, a remote setup if I wanted. But I wanted the rhythm of being back, the quiet power of walking into that office with my head high and knowing no one could threaten what I'd built anymore. The first day back, he showed up at lunchtime with Thai takeout and a sly smile. "You made it through half the day without screaming," he teased. "That calls for noodles." I laughed, and it didn't sound foreign in my mouth. He handed me a small paper bag, too. "This is from Emma," she insisted. Inside was a folded drawing of me standing behind a desk labeled Work Queen, wearing a tiara and holding hands with 2 stick-figure girls. I bit my lip. "I guess I'm royalty now." "You always were," Jackson said, looking at me like I'd won something only I could see. Things between us hadn't been defined exactly. There were soft kisses, slow evenings on the couch, shared grocery lists. He never pushed, never demanded answers or timelines, but he was there, consistently. Kindly, without fanfare. One night when the girls were at a sleepover, we sat on the back porch with mugs of chamomile tea, a blanket across both our laps, the crickets humming like a lullaby. I turned to him and said, "You saved my life." He didn't look away. "You rebuilt it, I just showed up." That meant more than anything else. I'd stopped waiting for apologies from people who didn't care enough to offer them. I'd stopped checking my phone for explosions. The shared family account remained frozen. My parents hadn't contacted me since the CPS visit, and I hadn't reached out, not because I was angry, because I was done. Mia had posted fewer vacation selfies lately. Rumor through a cousin was that their credit cards kept getting declined. My mother went back to teaching part-time. My father sold the boat. Life had tapped them on the shoulder. But me, I was steady. One day after school, Lucy ran into my arms, shouting, "I got a gold star in kindness," while Emma waved a certificate that read Most Improved Reader. We celebrated with pizza and ice cream and staying up past bedtime. I told them how proud I was, that they were strong, smart, kind, that no one would ever dim that light in them, not while I was breathing. And as they drifted off to sleep that night, tangled in each other's arms, I sat at the edge of their bed and realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. 1 year later, I stood in the back row of an elementary school auditorium. My phone lifted shakily as I tried not to cry. On stage, under cheap string lights and a hand-painted banner that read Talent Extravaganza 2025, Lucy spun in a glittery tutu to a squeaky recording of You Are My Sunshine, while Emma read a poem she'd written herself. My mom is brave, like heroes in books. She makes hot cocoa and never looks scared, even when she's sad or mad. She tells me even hard days aren't bad, because we're together and we stay. And my mom is magic in every way. I wasn't ready for that last line. I lowered the phone, blinking fast. Jackson stood beside me, hand slipping into mine, his voice low. "You okay?" I nodded, though my throat burned. I never thought I'd make it to this part." He squeezed my fingers gently. "You didn't just make it, you rewrote it." It was true. This room was packed with proud parents and sticky-fingered kids holding programs folded like origami. Teachers passed out juice boxes and clapped for every off-key solo and two-person skit. And there I was, holding space like I belonged, because I did. After the show, Lucy ran to me, still half dancing. Emma beelined for Jackson, proudly handing him a ribbon that read Poetry Powerhouse in glitter pen. "Do I get a trophy?" she asked him. Jackson grinned. "I'll see what I can do." We left the building hand in hand, with the girls skipping ahead, their laughter echoing in the parking lot like bells. In the car, Emma asked if we could get milkshakes to celebrate. Lucy chimed in, strawberry and whipped cream and sprinkles, because I was sunshine. We said yes, because now we could say yes to joy. When we got home, I tucked them into bed and kissed their foreheads the way I always did, twice for Lucy, once on each cheek, 3 for Emma, like we'd done since she was a baby. They fell asleep fast, worn out from sugar and applause. Downstairs, Jackson was on the couch, half asleep with a throw blanket around his shoulders and a half-watched nature documentary on mute. I stood in the doorway and just watched him for a moment. This man who never asked me to change, who never tried to fix me, just stood beside me while I found my own way back. He opened one eye, saw me, and patted the couch. I sat down. "You know," I whispered, "I think the old version of me would have spent tonight wondering if my mom saw the photos I posted, if she'd call, if Mia would message something biting, if I should have reached out." Jackson turned the volume off entirely. "But you didn't." I shook my head. "I didn't even think about it until just now." I rested against him. "Do you think they ever regret it, losing us?" He was quiet a long time. "Maybe, but it doesn't matter because you didn't lose you." That settled deep, because he was right. I'd lost pieces of myself, sure, broken places, bent under the weight of guilt and old roles and family systems built on silence. But I'd come back stronger, softer in the right places, sharper in the ones that needed it. And now I had something none of them could take: peace, a home filled with laughter, a love that showed up and stayed. The next morning, I posted a picture of the girls on stage, holding their certificates, their faces beaming. The caption was simple: "We made it, we're whole." And for the first time in years, I didn't wonder who would see it. I only cared that we did.